Good evening. We're concerned in this country about attracting students to study engineering so we have enough engineers for tomorrow's workforce. We know that diversity on an engineering team enhances creativity and drives innovation, so it's important for us to attract students from all different backgrounds. Engineering, educators and engineers have created programs aimed at attracting students in general and women and minorities in particular. But I'm going to talk tonight about how engineering can be so much more than just another academic focus. We can reach these students with empathy and change their lives. I know because it worked for me. I'm an engineer and an educator. I came to engineering for reasons that are common to us all, no matter our gender, our race, or socioeconomic status, but reasons that we don't often talk about. I'm talking about empathy, engineering empathy. I know. Engineers have been stereotyped as boring social misfits who can't hold a conversation without using charts and graphs. Years ago, I went to a party a friend of mine threw, and she introduced me to several of her guests, and she said she would introduce me this way: I'd like you to meet Anne. She's an engineer. And as the guest shot her a dirty look and looked for the exit, she'd say, oh, no, she's not that kind of an engineer. Anne's interesting to talk to. When I talk to people about engineering empathy, most people say, isn't that an oxymoron? That's not been my experience. In fact, when I talk to engineers about engineering empathy, they're moved. It's as if I've struck a chord and said something they've known all along but have never put into words about something that engineering has done for them emotionally. Here's what I'm talking about. Empathy is the capacity to recognize and understand someone else's feelings. And there are three feelings that all of us strive for from the time we're born until the time we die. The feeling of being valued, the feeling of belonging, and the feeling of having control over our circumstances. So why are these important? Well, it turns out that if people who experience those three feelings as infants and toddlers, they experience them consistently, they grow up expecting them to be there their whole lives, just like the air they breathe. People who don't experience those three feelings consistently as infants and toddlers, they hunger for them and search for them all their lives, although they may never realize that's what they're searching for. It's kind of like an emotional survival drive, and they tend to engineer those feelings in their lives. I know this because I'm one of them. I grew up in a rural Midwestern town. I'm the fourth of 5 children, a surprise baby to parents who were overwhelmed by the challenges of raising 3 older children, my mother's mental illness, and my father's struggle to support the family. Though they did the best they could, my parents couldn't meet those emotional needs consistently enough for me to grow up depending on that my emotional needs would be met. I was 9 years younger than my closest older sibling, so I felt more like a burden than a blessing. I was a curious and precocious child. Neither one of my parents went to college, so they often didn't know what to do with my intellectual drive. So I felt different and alone. But that was my normal. And as a child, I knew that my normal was different from other kids' normal. And I also knew that I didn't want it to be my normal when I grew up. So I sought to meet those 3 needs in different ways, although I wasn't aware until many years later that that's what I was doing. I decided my intellect was my ticket out. I also decided that my feelings weren't worth having because most of the feelings I was feeling weren't the pleasant ones. I spent many, many days outside exploring nature in the woods near my home and finding treasures in nature that I took apart to see how they worked. I fell in love with the night sky, especially the cycles of the moon and the stars. I took great comfort and joy in the cycles of the moon and the stars, which repeated reliably month after month, year after year. The joy I felt under a starry sky was a welcome respite from the often chaotic, anxious, and uncertain environment in my home. I still feel joy under a starry sky, but that's another TED Talk. I was lucky. I found my salvation in school. My teachers met my curiosity with warm acceptance and approval, and so I felt valued and loved as a result. I was good at learning the way my teachers wanted me to learn, and so I felt like I belonged there. I also experienced school as safe, predictable, consistent, and so that let me feel in control of my life. At the suggestion of one of my teachers, I entered and won a scholarship competition to study astronomy with a professional astronomer at an observatory during the summer after my junior year. At the suggestion of another teacher, I entered that astronomy research in a local science fair and in a national science talent search. I loved talking about my astronomy studies, and I loved writing about it. And to my surprise, I won 4-year scholarships in both of those competitions. That opened the door to admission to and scholarships to the most elite universities. So off I went to a faraway and highly competitive university to study astronomy. For the first time in my life, I struggled academically. And I didn't have anybody to talk to make sense of what was happening to me. I didn't realize that I was underprepared for, compared to the other students there, and that there were resources to help me. I never talked about my childhood because I was ashamed of it, and because I thought I would be judged unworthy to be what I wanted to be. So for the first time in my life, the academic setting, which had met my needs before, I felt different and alone again. And I felt like a failure. I had a crisis of confidence, and I came home. And through another stroke of luck, I ended up in an undergraduate co-op program with a local aerospace company. On my first day of work there, I got my first assignment to design a test fixture for an aircraft part. I was assigned an engineer mentor to help me through the design process. And so we looked at the part, we decided what the fixture needed to do, and he told me what materials would be available to me in the machine shop on site. So I set out to design the part. As I designed it, he asked me questions about my decisions, and he made helpful suggestions. And I thought I had designed a simple, functional, creative test fixture. And armed with my first engineering drawing, he led me down to the machine shop, introduced me to the operators there, and left me to build what I had designed. Well, lucky for me, those machine shop operators were very patient and kind, because we struggled to cut sheet metal and bend it and drill holes in it and fasten the pieces together to my exact and unreasonably rigorous specifications. In my need to succeed, I had designed a part that was ridiculously difficult to build. So I had failed at my first attempt at engineering, but I wasn't a failure. They let me know that I was expected to learn from that experience, and I did. I redesigned and I rebuilt that test fixture using the hard-won lessons I learned from the machine shop operators and my mentor. I also learned that engineers do the best job they can with the information they have. And then they learn from and correct mistakes as they get more information. They design, test, redesign, test, and redesign. The process works. Well, I loved working with that design team, with that bunch of colleagues. I felt that the others valued what I brought to the table. We worked together, we ate lunch together, we socialized after work together, and so I felt I belonged. I loved the shared feelings of control and accomplishment as we designed a high-performance aircraft and then watched it fly. Engineering met all three of those emotional needs that I didn't know I was looking for. So I was hooked. I changed my major to mechanical engineering, transferred to another highly competitive university, and that had a program that partnered with that aerospace company. So on my first day of engineering school, I met a small group of women who had many of the same classes that I did. We became good friends, and we supported each other through engineering school and then in our professional practices after graduation. We're still friends to this day. Here's a big secret about how engineers do what we do. It's loaded with opportunities to experience empathy and meet those three basic emotional needs. Engineering's a team sport. No one person can design and build the kind of complex objects engineers get to design and build. Not only do we engineer the object, but we engineer the emotions that make the whole process fun and interesting. And in the interdependence of teamwork, we also engineer who we are as people. So, how does this relate to engineering, educating our children? You know, brain researchers say that overwhelming physical and emotional experiences change the brain. We can think of any consistent overwhelming experience as trauma, and trauma can be many different kinds. It can be situational, such as the divorce of parents or the birth of a sibling. It can be developmental, such as losing a tooth or the onset of puberty. It can be temporary or long-lasting. But if children don't have empathic adults in their lives who can help them make sense of what is overwhelming to them, they learn to live in survival mode. And a child who lives in survival mode perceives the world as a threatening place. And they're too busy responding to perceived threats to learn very much in school. I've spent a lot of time as an engineer and many years as an educator. The schools that I've worked with as an educator mostly are schools where children come from challenging backgrounds like mine, where they might be responsible for the survival, their own survival, and even the survival of a sibling long before any child should be asked to. The kind of trauma, situational or developmental, short-term, long-lasting, that I've described can happen to any child. So when we think about educating our children, most of school learning is about individual learning. It's set up so that everybody learns the same thing at the same time. And we need students to come out of school with a basic set of skills and abilities. But for children who are concerned with meeting their own physical and emotional needs, what we ask them to do in school can sometimes seem irrelevant and more isolating. And it can add to feelings of overwhelm and failure. So what these children need from us is our empathy. They need to experience empathy in order to learn how to give it. They need to be understood, experience being understood by others in order to understand their own feelings and understand other people's feelings. They need to experience trust, how to make it, how it breaks, and how to repair it. They need to experience failure as an opportunity to learn without shame or blame and in an empathic and trusting group. For children who come from challenging backgrounds, this takes a lot of practice. Engineers aren't a bunch of Mr. Spocks who check their emotions at the door. Far from it. Engineers express, manage, and use their emotions in the context of their relationships. Engineers have a safe, consistent, and teachable way to engage with each other around a problem, work through the uncertainties in it together, and then forge ahead to a solution. We can create authentic team experiences in school engineering that have children experience empathy and create the conditions with which these basic emotional needs are fulfilled. But we have to do it intentionally. My research showed that teachers recognize that students can and must be taught to work collaboratively and to learn from failure without shame or blame. I found that the emotional and cognitive pieces of engineering need to be woven together explicitly and intentionally. The teachers I studied want to know how to do that. I believe that all students, especially students from challenging backgrounds, can experience empathy in carefully designed engineering experiences that are facilitated by caring and attuned teachers. These are skills that students will use all their lives. And this requires teachers to teach engineering differently than they teach science and the other subjects. After all, in engineering there are no right or wrong answers. There are just better or worse solutions depending on the design criteria. Let's provide students from all backgrounds with engineering experiences that appeal to their minds and hearts. Let's teach them to work together to create something that didn't exist before. That's an awesome feeling. Engineering is social learning, and the engineering problem can motivate students to apply what they've learned in other subjects and then to learn knowledge and skills that they need but didn't have. And students can also learn empathy and collaboration by bringing something into existence together. And they learn, especially when their solution doesn't work, they have to learn from it and redesign it and try again. These are skills that they'll use throughout their lives. In the United States, we're concerned about creating enough engineers for tomorrow's workforce, so we've incorporated engineering standards into the science standards for kindergarten through 12th grade. This gives us an unprecedented opportunity to facilitate and to foster in students not only engineering habits of mind, but empathic habits of heart as well. Habits that will lead them to deep satisfaction in work and relationships. The national standards call on us to teach all students to design, test, and redesign solutions to engineering problems. Will we have the empathy to use engineering to teach all students how to design, test, and redesign their relationships with others? I hope so. I've shared with you how engineering empathy has changed one individual life for the better. Just think of how engineering empathy in schools can reach those students who might otherwise be left behind. Thank you.